Leo Sun and Rising. Welcome to your July 2025 Astro Update. It's Raina here. So, I'm sure you know, July is a month when the sun goes into your sign and you're ruled by the sun. So, that makes it even more special. There's a lot going on, surprisingly enough, for July, because I usually think of July as a sleepy kind of a month. And I just want to first talk about the sun being in Cancer for the first few weeks. And so for Leo, this is your 12th house. So you may actually feel uncharacteristically, I don't know, monk-like, where you want to spend more time alone, recharge your batteries. That's kind of what the 12th house is like. It's the house of solitude, meditation, contemplation. It's the spiritual realms, past lives, karma. And when the sun is there, which is your vitality, it can feel like you need to have more rest and things like that. It's like your hibernation period before you make your debut again for the new year, because your birthday, your solar return, I mean, obviously I'm talking about the sun, um, the solar Leos, but also if you are Leo ascendant, that would be when the sun crosses over into your first house, whatever degree you are. So this July we have the sun entering Leo on the 22nd. It's not always on the same date, but it is going to be around that date. And but that's going to be 0 degrees of Leo. So if your ascendant is 15 degrees, you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks to have your day in the sun, so to speak, and have the sun cross over into your first house. So you may feel like more tired than usual, draggy. The other thing, but then you're going to feel that sense of revitalization. The other thing is that Mars will be in Virgo through the whole month, starting, actually starting in June, but going into August. So for you, this is your second house of earned income. And because of that, really, I was going to say that amazing retrograde in your sign, that Mars began in your sign back in December and just really stayed. It never got to Virgo at that time and was slowing down even before, December 6th. You haven't had Mars in the second house for quite a while, more than usual. So you may feel like a real sense of urgency or real desire to earn money, at least in the short term, for whatever reason. So that can keep you maybe you're going to be working overtime, or just like you have different irons in the fire and stuff like that. Now, on the 4th of the month, one thing I wanted to say is that one of the big news items for July is that Uranus is going into Gemini. This is going to form a friendly angle to Leo because when Uranus was in Taurus, it squared you off. And so this is going to be a sextile. And so this is more compatible energy, and that means it's going to be more cooperative. You may have felt a lot of resistance when Uranus was in Taurus, and this was actually your 10th house of career. So there may have been a lot of, kind of curveballs that were thrown to you in the past, 7 or 8 years, related to your career matters that for somebody like a Leo who is a fixed sign, then it might have been especially aggravating because you like to know, you like guarantees. Fixed signs tend to like guarantees. And, when I do personal readings and somebody will email me and they have all these questions, which I kind of discourage people from asking, yes, no questions, because those are, and be more open-ended. But people sometimes have like the shopping list of questions that they want, and more times than not, they're going to be fixed signs. Maybe not Leo, maybe they're Aquarians, or they're Taurians or Scorpios, because you like to have guarantees. You like to have consistency in life. And, life is not necessarily like that. And Uranus, sure as heck, is not consistent. It's actually very unpredictable. And so you may have faced something career-wise, or maybe there were multiple things that made it hard to feel a sense of continuity. You may have even switched careers in the past 7 years unexpectedly. And it could be because a certain line of work that you were in suddenly seemed like it was becoming antiquated, and you wanted to do something that you felt had a future. So anyway, now Uranus is in Gemini, and it's more compatible, and it should make it easier to manifest things. Okay, let's start at the beginning of the transits. We're also going to have several retrogrades, but I'll talk about that when I get there. On the 4th of the month, we have Venus going into Gemini. And so not only Uranus is going into Gemini, but Venus is. And Venus is a little bit delayed because of the retrograde in Aries earlier this year. And so the area of Gemini for you is the 11th house of hopes and wishes. It's also the house of gains, and Venus can be money. So this could indicate that you're going to come into a period of better earning capacity, because this has to do with career, or, maybe even the business that you own. So look to that to be a good money period for you, perhaps. It's also very social, which Venus is as well. The 11th house is Aquarius's house. And therefore, with Venus, that could be your it's friendships and groups, the 11th house. Venus could be just taking pleasure in social interactions. You may even meet love while you're socializing with your friends, encounter somebody romantically that way. And on the same day, Neptune goes retrograde at 3 degrees of Aries. So for Leo, that's your fellow fire sign. That trines you. So you have 2 transits on the same day that are both at friendly angles, and that's coming from the 9th house. And so what that can be is disillusionment involving 9th house matters. And this is a general reading, so sometimes, because this is an early degree of Neptune, 3 degrees of Aries. And so this may actually be in your 8th house. And that would be also, for some people, something that is a spiritual disillusionment. But in any case, I'm going to talk more about the 9th house here. And this can also be like some kind of like place, if you're like traveling, or you had this idealism about some place that you thought was going to be this perfect place, and you get there and you realize that, just like everything else in life, there are always going to be pluses and minuses, and maybe you feel disillusioned. Because when Neptune is in a house, there can be the danger of deception and overly idealizing something. Also, some kind of a guru, spiritual teacher. Ninth house can be uh, something to do with spirituality, but especially, I would say, if it has like an organized religion component, it can still be rather mystical, but it has that organized component. The eighth and the 12th houses are more open ended forms of spirituality, but the ninth house is more like these philosophical frameworks, and there might be some kind of disillusionment with that, or a teacher, or with higher education. In other words, university. You thought it was going to be one way and it's not, or you graduated from college and now you're like, okay, show me the jobs, show me the money. I thought that getting a degree was going to just be easy street for me, and now they're telling me I need a graduate degree to do whatever it is that I was trained to do. So things like that could be, you could see the side of it that isn't necessarily what you were hoping for. On the 7th, Uranus goes into Gemini. So Uranus goes into that 11th house. Uranus rules the 11th house. So it has an affinity with that area. I think one of the big influences when Uranus goes into a person's 11th house is that they may form friendships with people who are off the beaten path, who are like nonconformists, maybe hippies. And the other thing I think is a big thing is technology. Uranus rules technology, and you've got Uranus in its own house. And so for Leos, you tend to be people who are very dramatic, and you might be very good at creative self-expression. And you may find that the best way for you to get the word out about your gifts is through technology. So some of you may start YouTube channels and stuff like that. And Gemini rules the 3rd house in astrology, which is now, I've heard astrologers talk about it as the house of social media. Traditionally it was the house of media, meaning journalism, as well as other forms of media. And now it's social media. But the 11th house could be seen that way as well, because it is the person's social connections. So you may find that this is a great way to network, but you may be networking with people who are quite different or belonging to groups that are like very unusual. On the 10th, and also I just want to say that with Uranus in Gemini in this area, in its own house, you could go viral. You could find that, let's say you do a video and all of a sudden it takes off like a rocket. And it's like you go from obscurity to being like somebody with a lot of subscribers and a large audience. That's right up your alley, Leo. So that would be something that would be very pleasing to the average Leo person. On the 10th, we have a full moon at 18 degrees of Capricorn. For Leo, this is the 6th house, which is the house of work, your service to others, as well as the house of health and the house of your daily routine. You may find that your day, you have like your day ordered in a different way. Maybe you're ending the way that your schedule was. And that could simply be because you're getting a new job, and you're going to, it's like somebody who has to commute and they have to get up at 5 a.m, and all of a sudden they get a job nearby and they can get up at 7 o'clock. That's like a radical shift. And that's going to really, change your life in a big way. Just that kind of on the front end of things. For some people, you could be ending a certain type of work that you're doing or a certain job. The sixth house can be the workplace. Perhaps you get a promotion. The full moon can bring things to, its fullness. You may find out about coworkers who are talking behind your back or sabotaging you, something that was secret coming to light. On the 13th, Saturn goes retrograde at 1 degree of Aries in that ninth house. So I feel like some Leo people are training for something that has a religious connection to it. So it probably would be like a yoga teacher, for instance, and maybe you've already gone into the field and you're not that keen on it for some reason. You had this overly idealized view of how it was going to be because of Neptune, and it isn't living up to your fantasies. But that doesn't mean that it's completely a wash. You could salvage something, but maybe you're going to do things differently. Maybe you're going to, Saturn retrograde, I think, is restructuring. So if you had a certain plan that you were going to do things with, you may decide to change things up. Maybe you thought that it would be perfect to become a digital nomad, and you have run into some kind of, I don't know, obstacles, or it just, with Neptune retrograde, something that you idealized has turned out to be not what you had expected. Maybe it's not as easy or as pleasant for some reason. Again, it might just be that you're in a country that is not really where you want to end up and you need to keep traveling. For other people, it might be that it's not for you altogether, but at least you tried, if that's the case. When we look at the ninth house, any transits here, ninth house, because this is Sag's domain, represents freedom. And sometimes we think that, freedom can only come in one way, and we realize that's not necessarily the case. On the 18th, Mercury goes retrograde at 15 degrees of your sign, Leo. And so here you had Mars retrograde, now you're having Mercury retrograde. So what does that mean? Well, that can mean that you are rethinking something basic about your life. I mean, this is taking place in the first house. And I always consider the first house to be kind of a catch-all house for all things in your life currently. So you may be just having like a major shift. You may be rethinking something about what you are in the process of becoming, how you see yourself. And that may connect to other things like your job and all of that. Obviously that would, because that's how people identify themselves in life. A lot of times people say, what do you do? And that would be the sixth house or the 10th house of career, I guess. And here we have this kind of rebooting or rethinking. On the 22nd, the sun enters your first house. You're having your solar return. And this can be a sense of feeling reborn, because you'll probably feel more energized when the sun, as it gets closer to the degree of your sun or ascendant in Leo. And then 2 days later, we have an early degree new moon in Leo, 2 degrees on the 24th. So this can be a time of a great makeover, the great, what do they call that, extreme makeover? No, I'm just joking. But I mean, you might find that something in your life it's because this is also an early degree of Leo, is changing for you, and that this is the time when it is changing. We've been hearing from astrologers, and I've certainly been one of them, talking about fresh energy in 2025. That makes a lot of sense. But it's also, this is, something there's a new moon in Leo on a yearly basis, so it's not anything unusual, but the fact that it's very close to the sun entering the sign of Leo can mean that there's a fresh energy, a new energy associated with it. And so it could really emphasize new beginnings in a big way, because that's what the new moon represents in the first place. Set intentions, or even if you don't officially do it, like writing it down or anything like that, you can still, just spend time really thinking it through and thinking about what is working in your life, what isn't, and how you can change things on just like a very basic level. On the 30th, Venus goes into Cancer, and now we're talking about the 12th house. So Venus going from the 11th to the 12th. The 12th house is the house of karma. It can represent anything that is hidden. So Venus here can be a love affair that you are hiding from the public for whatever reason. It could simply mean that you're not ready to bring a relationship out into the light because you don't want this public scrutiny, or there might be other reasons why not. But it can also be any kind of creative project that you're working on independently. You're not really promoting it or talking about it, and you're just kind of trying to get it together so you can start promoting it or something along those lines. And that ends the month. So that's what I have for you, Leo. I hope that you're pumped for July. If you would like a private reading, I have package deals. The type of readings I do are, like just chart analysis. I do transits for the upcoming 12 months, and I have a package deal called my Deep Dive that has both of those full-length readings, which are at least an hour in length each, for a special price. And if you like the tarot, I have all 3 of those readings called the whole enchilada as a package deal. I have love readings and career readings. You can find out more information at the link below. Thanks for listening. Bye.